Welcome back to Reno Running Company for our beginning strength workout for runners. These are some things that I like to do at home. It's my strength routine. I typically try and get it in about 2 to 3 days per week. Just some really simple exercises you can do with body weight. And I've also brought a couple things that most of us have laying around at home if you need to add weight. So some Home Depot buckets filled with sand or paver blocks. Just some creative ways to think about how you can get a good strength workout in at home. So we're going to start out with bands. I like to do band for hip and glute activation. So 2 different types of bands. You can use either one. This one's going to be a little easier, more flexible. The second one is obviously thicker and going to make things a little more difficult. But these exercises that I'll start with are going to be for the hips and glutes. So I like to start first with the band right below my knee here. And then I'm going to walk sideways with this. So I put those feet just about shoulder width, maybe a little wider than shoulder width apart. And I'm going to do a sideways walk. When I do this, I squat down, just kind of a little quarter squat. And I like to think if I'm moving here to my left, I'm thinking about pushing with my right hip. The other key thing here, because we don't want to train bad habits, is to make sure that your knees are out. So when I push, I don't want that knee to collapse inwards. So I want my knee moving out, moving out. So the knee's moving out, and I'm just walking sideways. I'll walk about 10 in this direction, and then I'll go 10 back in the other direction. So I'm pushing with this hip. You'll notice again, and if you watched our first series of videos on our mobility, I'm doing these barefoot. I'm wearing correct toes. I like to do that just because I think they're great for my overall foot health. And I like to do pretty much all of my workout stuff barefoot if possible, if it's safe to do so, because I think it's really good for just intrinsic foot strength. So that's number 1 for the band, the sideways walks. Left and right. I'll then move the band down to my ankles, and now I'm just going to be walking forward and backward. When I do this, I'm really thinking about my running posture. So I'm looking at having that slight forward lean, nice and tall through the spine, and as I'm moving forward, I'm up on my heels, so my toes are dorsiflexed, and I'm thinking about good running arm swing. Just keeping tension on that band out the entire time, toes off the ground. When I move backwards, I then go up to my toes and I'm going back. Same thing, we're looking at good posture with your running, nice arm swing, and that's forward and backward bands. Then I do a bit of a monster walk, which is just going to be moving forward and backward again, but I'm kind of rotating out. So again, thinking about my knees staying nice and pushed out so we get good tension laterally on the hips there. I bring that in and walk out. Walk out. And then I'll do the same thing, but going backwards. Last thing I like to do with the band, a little bit of glute activation. If you have something that you can hold on to, just a wall for balance. If not, I just like to pull that back. So I'm pulling that band back and I'm really thinking about flexing that glute. So my left leg here going back, I'm flexing that left glute. I'm just pulling that back. Kind of a slight pause right there at the top of the movement. And then I'll switch to the other side. So now on the right, same thing. Just nice, try and get that foot moving straight back. Pause at the top. A little bit of glute activation. Perfect, and that's the bands. Next, we'll just move on to my series of, I guess, kind of true strength that I like to do. So the first one's a push-up, really, really simple. We're going to have, this is the beginner series. There'll be an advanced series with some different takes on these movements. First, if you're new to the push-up or it's difficult for you, just do it on your knees. So easy, just on your knees. The key here is perfect form. So we don't want our hips bent either way. We want them nice and straight, and we're just pushing down and coming back up. Of course, if you can do that perfect form, then we're going to do a perfect form push-up, just straight down, coming right back up. So I like this movement because it challenges us to engage our core. So I'm thinking more about what is this doing for my core stability than I'm trying to pump out the pecs. I like to, think about nice flat back and core, which is what we're going to focus on for all of these movements. So that's number one, the push-up. So the next set of movements are going to be planks. And again, just like the push-up here, we're thinking about really strong, solid core. So I'll go down into a front plank. I'm going to hold that for as long as I can with perfect form. Now, if you've been doing this forever and you can hold it for minutes and minutes and minutes, maybe 30 seconds to a minute, that's kind of the extent of what I typically go. But my absolute must in this is that I'm not breaking form. So I'm not having to move all around. I can stay for, even if it's 2 seconds, 5 seconds, maybe next year it's a minute, but I'm going to stay with absolute perfect form. So I'll typically go 30 seconds here. I'll then roll onto my side. And again, same thing, I'm thinking about that really nice alignment all the way through my body. So long, strong spine all the way through. It's like I've got a rod going through my body. You can see here, I'm on one foot. If you need to put the other foot out to balance, you can do that. But I'm just going right on that side, one foot stacked on top of each other, kind of a little more advanced. Put it to the side if you need to balance. So 30 seconds on that side, and then I'm going to roll over, do the same thing. 30 seconds on this side. Again, moving that foot if you need to balance, but only going as long as you can keep that perfect posture. And those are our planks. The next thing I'll do is just a real simple squat. So you can do an air squat. The key to any squat movement is you want to think about sitting back. So your actually first movement is backwards. Because of that, I like to hold something. So I've got a 20-pound weight here. I like to hold that out because it counterbalances my body so that I can actually go backwards. And here is where we can get creative with this movement. So if you don't have a 20-pound weight, I have a 1-year-old son. He weighs about 20 pounds. And he loves it if I just hold him out and I squat down with him out. You can take a Home Depot bucket filled up with sand and you can squat with that. So anything around the house that you can find to add a little weight to that movement, even if it's really light, I just like something to counterbalance so that I can actually squat back instead of thinking about leaning forward. So keys to a good squat quickly, there are a lot of them. Don't have time to go through everything in a squat mechanic, but of course you want your knees kind of tracking in line with your toes, either nice and straight or slightly out. What we don't want to have happen is when you squat, your knees dive in. That is an absolute no-no. I just think about knees going right out. I'm a big fan of challenging your range of motion with these movements. So if you can get down there and hold a really good deep squat, go for it. If you don't have that range of motion yet, then only go as far down as you can with perfect form, but constantly challenge that range of motion so that eventually you can get all the way down. As runners, we have a very short range of movement, and so I feel that these things help really extend that range of motion. It's good for our flexibility, injury prevention, etc. So the next movement after the squat is the deadlift. This, for today's purposes, I've just got my 2 buckets here. If you've got 2 dumbbells, you can always do dumbbells. If you actually have a hex bar or a flat Olympic bar set up at home, that's fantastic, use that. But I just like to do a little something for that added, kind of added weight to this movement. So now, a little similar to the squat, I'm just going down and lifting up. So I like to think of this as my full connection from my upper body to my lower body. So I'll work that. Now, if you've got something that you can stand on, so you can increase that range of motion, I think that's great. But also, if you had a bar in your hand, now you can really get that connection into the lower back. Or if I had 2 dumbbells, you know, you hold those dumbbells and you're just kind of standing up, just dragging that weight up across the front of your thighs like that. You can even do this with no weight at all, just to kind of get that movement where you're standing up with that full hip extension at the top. Really good for us runners with the connection between lower body and upper body. The final thing that I do with the buckets is just a farmer's walk. So running, obviously, as we're pounding the ground with 3-ish times our body weight, there's a lot of that side to side stability that goes on. So find a farmer's walk, just holding something heavy in both hands and having to stabilize so that I'm not rocking side to side. I'm just keeping that nice posture. I like going forward and backwards on this, but just a farmer's walk. Again, whatever you can find at your house. This one I like to go heavy. It's hard to really overdo yourself and go too heavy on this one. You know, as heavy as you can to maintain that stability. So the farmer's walk. And then probably the most, certainly one of the most important muscles in our running mechanics are going to be our glutes. So for this one, I'll get back down on the floor and we're going to do a glute bridge. So for the glute bridge, I'm just laying on my back. In this beginner series, we're going to do this with both legs at the time. We'll go into single leg in the next video, but I'm up on my heels. I have my head back, and now I'm just really forcefully contracting those glutes. So I like to pull that up and hold, even tap the glutes, make sure that they're really activated. Kind of like a plank on this side. I'll hold that for about 30 seconds, back down. But again, you only want to hold for as long as you can maintain that nice straight spine alignment. So glute bridges, I'll do there, making sure that you're getting, I'm always a fan of just kind of like tapping muscles, whether it's calves or quads or glutes, just to make sure that they're truly activated. And that's the glute bridge. And then the last thing that I like to do is just kind of an all fours reach. So again, good for the connection between upper and lower body, and a really, really good drill for keeping our hips nice and stable. So I'll get down here on all fours, and then I'm going to reach out with my right and push back with my left. So my right goes out and my left goes back. Again, really, really focusing on firing that glute. And then I'll bring that in. I try and stabilize here for a second. So I'm only connected to the ground with my left hand, my right knee, and my right toes. And I'll just extend that out. Hold, bring it back, extend and hold. Then I'll go to the other side. Same thing on the other side. It's a pretty easy one. You can tell if you've got balance issues from one side to the other. One might be significantly easier than the other side. But my key here is when I do this, I want to keep my back nice and flat. If you have something that's, not too wobbly, like a ball will fall off pretty much anybody, but even just a piece of paper you can put on your back so that when you're doing this, you know that your back and your hips are nice and stable. What you don't want to have happen is to roll either way into that. You want to keep this nice and tight through the midsection there. And then in all of these movements, I like to do sets of 10, sets of 12. I'll go through the whole thing 3 times. Obviously for some of the movements that you can do heavier weight, I have no problem with doing heavier weights and challenging that strength, especially as runners. We don't do a whole lot of that. And going down into that 3 to 5 rep range, but always making sure that you have perfect form. So thanks for tuning in to our beginning Strength for Runners series.